Welcome to the Referrals Podcast, the show designed to help everyone from the solopreneur to the Fortune 500 company win the referral game. If you want to build a company with an army of ambassadors and raving fans who speak highly of you and refer you willingly, you are in the right place. And now, here is your host, Michael J. Maher.
Welcome, everyone, to another amazing episode of Referrals Podcast. Welcome back to those of you that are longtime listeners and viewers. We really appreciate you. Thank you. And for those of you that are brand new to the podcast, I just have to say, welcome to the family. We love having you. Hopefully you're interested in building a business based on love, generosity, and appreciation as well. Today, I have to tell you that we are going to help you begin boldly. We are going to help you begin, right? I mean, it's like, who said it? Somebody said you don't have to be great to get started, but you got to get started to be great, right? I think it was Zig Ziglar, and it could have been 9,000 other really great thought leaders. But here's the bottom line, right? You got to get started. And if you're going to get started, don't start with a whimper. Let's begin boldly. Let's make it happen. And I'm really excited about to have the guest that we're going to have on today. You're going to love her just as much as I do. And here's the thing, right? I'm so underqualified to interview this young lady that it is amazing. I'm going to botch it. I'm going to mess it up. I'm not going to ask I'm going to try to figure this out as I go. But I have to tell you, that's how I made it in business, is I interviewed a lot smarter, a lot more successful, a lot more influential people than myself, which led me to learn the secrets of those people. And guess what? We're going to let you in on that one-to-one today. Here's the thing. I will tell you that I have a great shout out to Chris Boxall. Chris Boxall just signed up for Referral Mastery Summit, rms22.com. I just recently finished reading 7L. I just did my first Zoom mastermind today and just signed up for RMS 22. I am looking forward to meeting everyone in September. Cheers, Chris Boxall. Listen, he's brand new to this, and he's all in. I'm telling you, I'm betting on people like Chris Boxall. rms22.com to join us in September. Limited seating. It is a live and in-person event in Orlando, September 27th through the 29th. It is very limited seating, and maybe even more importantly, the rooms. And we got a room rate of $129. I'm telling you, at the B Resort Hotel and Spa, we negotiated during the COVID 2020, and they gave us a great deal. But you know what? They gave us a limited number of rooms at that price. You got to make it happen. rms22.com. Make it happen. Speaking of making things happen, listen to this intro. No, I need you. I know sometimes you start taking notes when the interview starts. Start taking notes right now. Christie Hunter Arscott is an award-winning advisor, speaker, and author of the book, Begin Boldly. Are you watching this on YouTube? If not, watch us on YouTube. I'm telling you. How women can reimagine risk, embrace uncertainty, and launch a brilliant career. Christie is a leading expert on how we can harness the power of intentional risk-taking to create more dynamic and vibrant careers and organizations. A Rhodes Scholar, hello! Christie has been named by Thinkers 50 as one of the top management thinkers likely to shape the future of business. Wow, that's not impressive at all. Christie was also selected for the biannual Thinkers 50 Talent Award shortlist of the top global thought leaders in the field of talent management. Christie holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Brown University, Ivy Leaguer, a certificate of distinction in general management from Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. Hey, why not hit both coasts, right? Let's just go to the best schools on both coasts of the United States. 2 master's degree with a focus on gender research from the University of Oxford. United States was not enough for her. She had to conquer England and Europe too. She currently serves on the Women's Leadership Board of the Women and Public Policy Program at Harvard Kennedy School. Because she didn't get all the schools in, she had to become on the board of the Harvard Kennedy School. Without further ado, let's welcome Christie Hunter Arscott to Referrals Podcast.
Thanks. I don't think I've ever giggled so much through an intro, so thank you.
You're giggling. I'm like drop the freaking mic. You don't even, here's the thing. It can only go downhill from here because I'm going to talk. It's like, you gotta tell us about this book, right? My wife fell in love with this book, and I'm telling you, she reads a lot, right? She's read everybody. And it's one of those where it's very rare when she will read it and then go, Michael, you need to look at this book. So I looked at this book. And those of you that know me, I don't read books. I literally devour them. And I'm telling you, this isn't a women's book. This isn't a book just for women. I mean, I know you wrote it for women. It says how women can reimagine risk. So instantly the men will want to buy it because the men want to know. I mean, did you ever hear about that book that sold 1 million copies, and it's Everything a Man Knows About a Woman? That was the title. It sold over 1 million copies. Did you know that?
No.
You open up the book and all the pages are blank. Everything a Man Knows About a Woman. And it's so true. 1 million copies of that book. And it's like, here we are selling in the hundreds of thousands of books, and they sold 1 million of a blank freaking book. Crazy. All right. So what inspired you to write Begin Boldly?
Yeah, thanks. So there were so many different things, but I wanted to start off by just pointing out a couple of things that you just said. And one is, you said this isn't just a book for women. And it's interesting because as I was writing it, and, it's years in the making, my husband, would hear kind of the different concepts that I was presenting. And he said something very similar, which is like anyone could learn from this in any stage of their career. So even though it's targeted at women and we say begin, some people say, well, I'm not beginning, I'm later in my career. And really the tools and techniques and frameworks transcend gender and also career level. But I saw, going back to your question, I saw the most need and the biggest gap in the early career women's space, which is the majority of programs that are targeted at retaining women and focusing on career development for women are too little too late. They come at the more senior level management, and women are lagging men from day one on the job. So men might be taking more risk to negotiate a salary, and then we're lagging in title and compensation. There's studies that came out that we're lagging in aspiration and confidence year 2 on the job. So even though anyone could benefit from the concepts and tools, the thing I think about is like women are here when they start out. There's data showing that, well, men are here. And although the tools could help anyone, women have to fill a bigger gap at this stage. And so that's why it's calibrated in that way.
Yeah, that's a great motivation on it. I love that. And it's one of those where, why do you think they start like that? Why do you think it starts behind? I mean, I'm genuinely curious. Like, is it the schooling? Is it parenting? What do you think kind of makes them start their career maybe behind?
Yeah, so it's interesting because in a lot of the data, if you look at graduation rates, we see higher rates in women in general across many different majors. There's some that are exceptions than men, but we see that once women enter the workforce, it is lagging. And so the kind of acquiring of education isn't equating to advancement in the workplace. And I honestly, I could spend the next 2 hours talking about why that is. There's so much around nature and nurture. There's been a lot of studies done on what that looks like, what societal standards look like in different contexts, the kind of messages we tell girls. But it goes back partly to, and this is why the book's focused on risk-taking, is how are women taking more chances and risks on themselves? And I really think we're not, and we need to start sooner. So there's always an excuse, let me wait till I'm ready. Let me wait till I have more expertise. And studies show men are more likely to put themselves up for a job when they have 60% of the qualifications, while women feel like they have to have 100. That's an example of a risk we should be taking more. But the reality is, like, the world reacts differently to women. And so I really think that we just need methods and tools to take risks and chances on ourselves sooner. So that's really the solution that I'm offering here, which is one of many levers we'll have to pull to really see a change.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that kind of leads us into this next part where, recent studies kind of show that 1 in 4 women are reporting that they are actually thinking about leaving the workplace or downshifting their careers. Why do you think we're seeing that kind of a trend?
Again, so many reasons. And it's also, I know you have an international audience. It's really dependent on location and the economy, as well as the political state of play in different countries. So there's many different things. And I don't want to oversimplify a complex issue, but I'll tell you a few things that I think are driving it. One is obviously we've seen the impact of the pandemic over the world. And we've also seen that despite the fact that women have made gains in the workplace, at home, the balance of home care and childcare still remains largely imbalanced. And that puts women in a position where there's often more tension and conflict and feelings of burnout, particularly when I think kind of the boundaries, if there were ever any full ones between work and home, are even more blurred because of the pandemic. And so it's fascinating because one bit of my book actually talks about, to really be bold and have room for risk, you have to use certain mindsets to negotiate and invest your time wisely in the things that matter and reduce feelings of conflict. And that goes for women and men. And so that's something that I find really important. One thing I wanted to call out is the simple answer to your question. When I did research years ago, why are women leaving the workforce? The majority of executives said, oh, babies, this is why they leave. But it's never that simple. My studies showed that, that might be a final straw for some women, but it's these compounding impacts over time from day one on the job, maybe not seeing role models like them further up, maybe being in a male-dominated environment, maybe facing bias or double standards. And then at the end, they'll leak out. Maybe that's the final straw, maybe the pandemic, maybe having a kid, but it's never the whole story.
Yeah. And maybe they're not feeling respected, or maybe they're not feeling fulfilled at work. And maybe they feel that having babies or taking care of babies fulfills something, right? I mean, it's an interesting dynamic there, but it's a lot of our audience are real estate agents. Yeah. And, 65% of all real estate agents are female, are women. And it is risky, well, it's an entrepreneurial type of atmosphere, right? Ultra competitive, because even the person next to you and then is competing with you, even though you're at the same brokerage or office. But it's just one of those where it's just all these lessons apply to, it applies to everyone. It really does. It just, because there's a lot of men who feel disrespected and not fulfilled in whatever job that they're doing, right? And I'll tell you, so how can men and women address and improve? Like you said, one of them was frustration and burnout. Like how can they improve that, or how do they go away from burnout and frustration to feeling great about it and fulfillment?
Yeah. So I talk about it I talk about the fact that as a woman working kind of in the gender field, I get asked a lot to talk about work-life balance. And I respectfully decline because I think work-life balance is an outdated term, and it's also an elusive ideal at best.
Let's go. I love it. Let's go. Balance is a myth.
It is. It totally is a myth. So what I do talk about is time and energy optimization as instead. So if everyone on the line get rid of the thought or even trying to set yourself up for work-life balance, it doesn't exist, and we're just setting ourselves up for disappointment and failure. But if we think about how to optimize our time and energy, it becomes a lot easier. So let me explain a little bit what I mean. Imagine you have a wallet. And
Have a what?
A wallet.
I thought you said a mullet. And I instantly wanted to call my son in here with the new hairdos these teenagers are wearing that, like, in the 80s it was popular, but it's like, what are you doing? And it's just like, so we got to start with a mullet. And I was like, he could be our model. Let's go right now. All right, so start with a wallet. I got it. All right.
I'm going to look back on this and have a good laugh about the time I was interviewed about a mullet. But anyways, let me go back to the wallet. So you have a wallet with a limited number of dollars in it that represent your time and energy, right? So we all know energy is not infinite. And then also in terms of time, we know we have 24 hours in a day. And so the question is, how are we going to spend that money to optimize our investments and to increase the return on our investment? So a common mistake I see people making is they will invest all of their time and energy in the workplace into something, and then they'll get to year-end performance review and they'll say, oh, my manager actually gave me a rating that was lower than I thought. And they actually wanted me to focus on X and I was focusing on Y. And then I say, have you ever asked them what matters most to you? And if you're a real estate agent and you're working with clients and you're putting all of your energy into, let's say, staging this or taking them here, but you've never asked what matters to you as the client, you're unlikely to be investing your limited dollars in the areas that are going to make the most impact. The same is in our home life. So imagine you're, working at a big company and you're feeling stretched because you're rushing home every night to have dinner with your family. And you feel bad because you're multitasking with your family, you're getting back online at night, you're leaving your team there. You feel just on all ends, you're failing. But maybe your family doesn't want you there every night. Maybe your family just wants you there on the weekend when you're not multitasking. And a lot of people are doing what they think, they're assuming what their manager wants, their client wants, their family wants, and they're not asking. And when you ask and not assume, you open up the realm of being able to invest your time and money in a really informed way. So you'll free up time because you'll suddenly realize I'm investing time into things that don't matter to the people that matter to me. And in my book, I give you an example of how you can do it. It's called Stakeholder Assessments, and it's based on the work of Stu Friedman out of Wharton. And it's amazing. You would never start a new product or service without, doing an assessment of your clients or the market. But we need to apply that to our own lives and careers so we can invest our time, money wisely.
Well, I will tell you just from that is it's interesting you included energy in time and energy management because, forever it's been time management, and people have said that time is the most precious asset. And I always counter that with, I believe that energy is actually the most precious asset, right? Because everybody gets 24 hours. Not everybody has the same amount of energy. 8 hours of your time is going to be sleeping, and you're going to have to do other things. You got to eat, but the energy is one of those where we only have a finite amount of energy each day. And how are we utilizing those energy moments versus just all day long, right? And so how did energy kind of come about in your studies, in your research? And is it one of those where what do you feel about all that, right?
So it's so funny. I don't have as much content around that in my book other than in this one chapter, but I've been interested in this topic for a long time. And it was years ago, I was working with Deloitte Consulting, and there was this company that came up, and I think it was by this gentleman called Tony Schwartz, and it was called the Energy Project. And it was all around how companies and teams and clients, we can help manage our energy more. So it was simple things like applying an interval training method to work in terms of resting and breaks. Then we saw Ariana Huffington launch Thrive when she faced extreme burnout and doing a lot of research and focus on sleep and energy as well.
Yep.
So I think in the last 10 years, there's been a huge movement because people realize this. Now, time, because I agree with you, time is not infinite. We know we all have the same amount of hours in our day, but energy is a lever that we can pull and optimize in different ways. And there's been some amazing work just on how we work, how we re-energize, how we recharge. One thing I will tell you that I've seen in my work is that the best companies are giving people time to recharge or allowing them to experiment with projects that really refuel them in ways that re-energize, because it's not just an energy drain, it's how do we re-energize ourselves.
That's right. Powerful. That's I've read Thrive, right? And I haven't read the Energy Project. I don't want to say I'm psycho about sleep and energy right now, but I've read probably 35 books in the last couple of months just really about this. We have a course that we teach that what I'm hoping is just we can really maximize people's energy on a daily basis and figure out how that is. But the age of the 5 a.m. club and the 4 a.m. club and the whole this thing that you got to get up butt crack of dawn to get something done is counterproductive for 99.9% of the population, in my opinion, because there's one way I can tell you to have no energy all day, and that's not get enough sleep for you. Period. Right? You're like, no, I'm going 4 hours, 5 hours, and then you don't get anything done the next day because you're dragging, right?
Yeah.
It's just so all right.
I was actually looking for this. Hold on, I was looking for this quote for you actually. So what I was thinking about as you were talking is our society up until now has put so much focus on productivity.
Yeah.
And I even fell into that. Like if I am resting, I am not being productive because every hour, and I even remember getting in situations where I have a young son and every hour I was paying for childcare, I was like, oh, I should be working. So I offset the balance. And that is a sick mindset. Luckily, I've gotten out of that. So anyone that did that, I'd love to, reframe that. But I saw this quote the other day, and we often think productivity means to work. It doesn't. Productivity means to make intentional choices towards a goal. The choice could be to pause. The goal could be to replenish, and productivity could mean to rest. And the idea that, being productive involves rest and they're not in conflict, but they're part of the same thing, I think is really powerful.
Can you send me that?
Yes.
I'm all over that. I mean, it's just right now I am just quoting and quoting, get out of prediction and get into production, right? And it's like so many people are they're trying to they're trying to figure out what the world's doing, and it's like, all right, just don't worry about it. All right, get into production and serve the person nearest you, right? And then find the next person to serve. So that's just a really good quote.
That's interesting because it links to what you said earlier. So you were talking about get started to be great. You just need to get started. And here you're saying get out of prediction and start producing, right? Yeah. And that's actually one of the key themes in my book is how do we break the cycle of analysis paralysis when we are paralyzed by analysis? And so one of the concepts in the book is agile experimentation, which is how to get out of our own way is treat everything like an experiment. So we have to just be like an err on the side of action. And there's some amazing work done by Stu Friedman, who I mentioned earlier, and then Hermania Ibarra, who's out of INSEAD. And she talks about, we think we need to analyze and act, but we need to act, then analyze. It links so much to all of the themes that you're talking about, which I think is a nice synergy I didn't even realize before we got on this call.
All right, so I'm just going to do this with our planned questions, and we're just going to have like the realest, rawest conversation ever. All right. So ask, then analyze. Unpack that for us. Like, what does that mean? I mean, because act and then analyze. Yeah. That's right. So act and analyze, right? So what do you think that means, right? I mean, begin boldly. Obviously, that's what that means, right? And by the way, for those of you that are watching or listening, go get this book. Where can they get this book?
So right now it's available on Amazon. You can get it from Barnes & Noble. It's distributed by Penguin Random House. But Amazon has it available for pre-order, and it'll be released on August 2nd, and the audiobook is already available. So go check it out.
Hot off the press, people. You have a chance to get this hot off the press. I feel very honored. I have a pre-copy. Yeah, I love it. So, all right. So the one thing is, all right, act, then analyze. So too many people don't do that, right? They're like, they look at all the options until one of them scares them, and then they don't have to take action, right? So what's act, and how does that look like from an implementation standpoint? How does that look like from a reality?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like, I think you're right. We so often overanalyze on the front end, and this is what you were talking about too, that you'll focus on prediction or you won't get started. And so what I found, and this happens particularly with women, but irrespective, it can happen with anyone, is this cycle of analysis paralysis. And when I started my career, I was like, well, what do I want to do? I don't know. I was graduating. I didn't know what was next. And my boyfriend at the time, who became my husband, was like, you're not going to know till you try. And that simple piece of advice, it resonates in business, in life, and everything. And analysis without action has so much limitation. So what Ibarra encourages us to do in her research is really, you have to act and then analyze. And we get the good data from that actual action. So instead of sitting, and the other thing I want to share is, this has helped me take more risks, is we often weigh the pros and cons of action. Like, what are the best and worst case scenarios of taking this risk? But we rarely look at the costs of inaction. And that's just the way our brain is wired. But inaction, not taking a risk, not making a bold move, also comes with a cost. So we need to analyze, we need to think about that as well. But really, it's so simple. Err on the side of action. Treat everything like an experiment. So if you don't know if something's going to work in your career or in your life, say, let's try it for a month. This is what we're going to do. Why don't you try to do this? I'll try to do this. It works in the workplace. So let's say you want a more flexible working schedule. You're not going to go to your boss and be successful and say the entire company needs to change their flexibility policy. But if you said, I'd love to work from home these times, what if we tried it for a month? We'll track my sales, my referrals, my client metrics, whatever it may be. And at the end of the month, we'll see whether it's working. Same in a family. If you're looking at division of caregiving in your household, what if we tried, you did the pickups these days, I did them this day, or we shared this and this. Why don't we try it for a month and see how it goes? So these are the kind of things that I think really acting and then analyzing, treating everything like an experiment that can really push progress in at home and at work.
And you call this agile experimentation.
Experimentation, yeah.
Love
so
that.
There's a whole model for that in the book, actually. And the idea is that you start with a process of like inquiry and isolating your intent. Like, what is your why? Why am I doing this? So that you have that motivation. You ask some critical questions, which I lay out. You ideate, which is you come up with ideas. So once you know what you want to do, there's often multiple ways to solve it. So I was on a call yesterday and someone said, like, I want more time to do X, but I'm scared about hiring and my overhead. And I'm like, you're jumping to one solution and you're missing the ideation phase where it's like, what are the options? I could be outsourcing. I could be hiring. There's always more than one choice. But then you pick what you're going to experiment with, measure outcomes and impact, and then you use the insights from those experiments to evolve. Am I continuing with this experiment? Am I abandoning it? Am I refining it? So I really think that's the way to do more of what we're talking about here, the producing, the acting, get started to be great.
I'll tell you, I love that. So, I mean, the one question that is just begging out of my head is just, like, how does confidence play a part in all of this? It's one of those where, I think one of the reasons that a lot of people maybe don't take the risk is just maybe a lack of confidence in themselves that it's going to work. How does confidence play in all this in your book?
Yeah. So I actually downplay confidence in favor of looking at courage. And so let me explain that. I agree with you completely. And my research has shown me that when people don't take a risk, it's largely due to fear of failure, fear of the unknown, or self-doubt and lack of confidence. And so there's a couple things we need to do to address that. So first, on the latter, lack of confidence. There's been so much in the discourse in this world focused on how to cultivate your confidence, how to be more confident. And I just think confidence is, again, a bit of an elusive ideal. It's very fleeting. It's very black and white. If we want to make a bold move and wake up that morning and don't feel confident, are we not making it? I mean, we'll never get anything done if we're waiting to feel confident. If I waited to feel confident, I wouldn't be speaking in front of thousands or writing my book or, being interviewed completely off script today. So, But what I do,
which I just have to tell the audience, you gave me permission to do. I just want to throw that out there, that she knows her material so nails that she wasn't even worried about it until right now. I'm just kidding.
No, I think it's so much better to have a free flowing conversation. And so the main focus I have is, let's stop this focus on confidence. Stop waiting to feel confident before taking a risk or making a bold move. Focus on being courageous in the absence of confidence. So I'm going to say that again. Focus on being courageous in the absence of confidence. And if you have two doors and you have to choose one, courage or confidence, choose the courage every time. And the reason why is courage will allow you to err on the side of that action, even when you feel the least self-assured. And my work has shown that then confidence is actually a byproduct or output of being courageous. It doesn't work the other way around. It's not confident, then make a move, then be courage. It's courage to make bold moves, and then you'll cultivate that confidence. So that is one thing. And then the other thing you mentioned was just about people fearing failure. And I think one thing I talk about a lot in the book is just failure is not fatal. And failure is actually some of the most important information we can get to refine our approaches. And the way that I presented this risk-taking ritual, it's this 4-part, very simple intentionally, so you can paste it on your wall, but it's risk, reward, refine, repeat. And in the reward section, after that step, after you've taken the risk, I say assess your rewards. And failures are also rewards. We have to reframe and reimagine failure as rewards as long as you learn from them and have the mindsets to grow. And what I also talk about is that if you risk and grow, even if you go back a bit and then you grow, you'll go further than a consistent choice to play it safe. And then the next step, refine. This question might be helpful in relation to what you mentioned as well, which is, then you ask, am I going to let the outcome of this risk taking define me or refine me? And the whole thing is, just because you failed doesn't mean you are a failure. That is an outcome identity conflation. Really, that's defining you. Don't let it define you. Let it refine you. How are you going to refine your approaches moving forward? And it's this amazing ritual or mantra I think we have to use in all areas of our life. So it's really choosing courage over confidence and really embedding that failure as reward and let me allow it to refine me and not define me.
Yeah, failure is an event, not a person, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love the 4 R's. I'm all over that. That's beautiful. And so, all right. So I'm going to jump just a little bit because it's one of my favorite parts of the book. All right. So talk about the bold moves, right? So talk about that as a strategy and a program.
Yeah. So one thing that I found in just a little context before is that it's not that women and men don't aspire to take risks, but that they don't have a method or a formula for doing it. And one thing I talked about yesterday in an interview was, I'm not telling you to just take any risk recklessly, or to, if you've never paraglided before, jump off a mountain with a paraglide.
Let's go! Yeah.
But we
Parachute.
take risks. I mentioned this in the book. We take risks all the time, like getting in our car is a risk, but we likely have the number of a towing company, we have our manual in the front, we have an emergency note, we know how to drive, we know the roads. There are certain things that we come prepared with. And risk taking is no different in other areas. We need a method to risk take. And that's what the bold moves method is. So for everyone on the line, essentially the moves method is what you use in that first step of the risk, reward, refine, repeat. It's how you assess whether this is a risk worth taking. And the first is, and it goes MOVES is how you can remember it really easily. So.
I have to tell you that this audience is so open to acronyms. It's not, in fact, I think I'm going to end today on an acronym. So love, and honestly, maybe one of the reasons I love that part of the book, I mean, literally I have it right here, right? So one of the reasons I have that marked so well is because I just love it. And I love the fact that it's an acronym and it's so helpful. So
it's so easy to remember, and it's just a formula you can apply. So the first is motivation and assessing what is my motivation for taking this risk. And this is so important for a number of different reasons. But it's interesting, Michael, when we got on this call, the first thing I asked you was, what was your impetus or reason for starting this podcast? Because I wanted to know your why. And when you talked to me, it was funny.
Are you going to share the reason I gave you or no?
We'll do a better job, but I love to focus on generosity and your life journey. And then when you said jokingly at the beginning that, I've got imposter syndrome and I'm not qualified to interview you. But I'm thinking, I was giggling because I was thinking that knowing you and what your motivation is, and your motivation being so strong, no matter what situation you get into where you might feel that kind of unease or make jest out of it, you return to that that motivation, and it will fuel you through anything. Mm-hmm. And that's how I feel here is like, I know very strongly what my why is. So when I take a risk and I feel self-doubt coming in or my inner critic, I return to that motivation. So for everyone on the line, I really think about any risk you're taking and crystallize a motivation that matters. And remember, if it doesn't matter, it won't motivate. So if you assess the motivation and it's something like an external comparison or a tick the box or something someone else wants me to do, then it's unlikely to fuel really smart risk taking. The other thing is that I just mentioned is that when you're thinking about your motivation maintains momentum in those times when you're grappling with inevitable fear and self-doubt or lack of confidence, like we talked about. The next is O, which is opportunity and opportunity costs. So just quickly there, I found that language can either elicit action or inhibit action. And the word risk makes us think we need to manage or mitigate it. And by reframing it as an opportunity to make a bold move, it's more likely to elicit action. So if I say, oh, I could take the risk of trying to get this big real estate client, right? Suddenly you think, oh, what could go wrong? But if you say, I have the opportunity to make the bold move of going for that client or that job or that gig or that role, it's suddenly more likely to elicit action. The other side of the O is opportunity cost. Every bold move and risk you take in your life is going to have trade-offs, and we need to have honest conversations upfront. What are you going to give up or say no to? What does that look like? The V is vision. And I ask here for everyone to think about their future state vision in the sense of, if this works out, what am I going to be doing, feeling, surrounding myself with? What will my life look like? And the reason we do future case, best case scenario vision is because the way that our brains work, it's much more likely to think about the worst case. You'll plan that. We're trying to counteract that tendency by creating that best case vision. The next, we've got E, which is end game plan. And this is about planning, what am I going to do if things go well? And what am I going to do if things don't go well? Because this whole process is not about avoiding failure or minimizing failure. It's about preparing you to deal with failure and learn from it and fuel your risk-taking capacity in your career to come. And then end game plan if things go well. Well, if I publish this book, what am I going to, and this becomes like, it was like, when I was in this process, I had to think, if I get a publisher, I put this out, what am I going to do? What's my end game plan to be successful, to step up to the plate? So you also have to think about that. And then the last is support. No woman is an island. No one is isolated from other people. We're all connected and we fuel that connectivity. So we really, really have to focus on how can we use our connections with others to support us through taking the risk and also afterwards. And so I do a little bit of a discussion on your success advisors, your stakeholders, and also your safety net, because that's particularly important. So that's the moves: motivation, opportunity cost, vision for the future, end game plan, and your support.
Just drop your mic. I mean, it's like that. Listen, if this just helps one of our listeners or viewers get off the zero, and one of the things I love about this is that you kind of compared it to driving. My son is beginning to drive, and he's driven in a empty parking lot, right? Yeah. That's his and I was like, all right, now we're gonna drive home. No, right? And, the same kid who knew everything 5 minutes before. But it's one of those where it's like, at one time driving was really scary, but we ended up learning it, right? Well, and there's, it goes back to motivation, right? The motivation of driving is you get freedom, right? Is like, you get to go out, you get to not have to rely on anybody else. You get freedom. And it's like opportunity, right? It's like, all right, what's the opportunity cost? What's the opportunity benefit? And then you go to vision, and it's like, if it works, how are you going to feel? What are you going to do? What do anything, you can go anywhere, And then the end game plan is like, once I'm a driver, what's it going to be like? And it's like no limitations. And then the support is your parents helping you drive, a driver ed program, the other people in your car. The better you learn how to drive, the other people in your car will be safer,
Yeah, and you actually hit upon something though that's so powerful too. I love the way you applied that to the driving example, but you talked about starting small and then scaling. And I talk about that in my book. He started in the parking lot before he went on the road. Yeah. And so I say in the book, I talk about courageous acts or micro acts of courage. And I say we often overestimate the impact of large risks, moving countries, starting a company, and we underestimate the impact of incremental, consistent, courageous acts taken over time. And we've got to imagine those as like those little investments we're making that are going to have compounding returns over time. So when I work with women, it's not always about need to speak in front of 3,000. It could be, am I raising my hand more in a meeting, right? And am I using my voice more? And you just gave the perfect example with your son in the parking lot.
Yeah, and it's about 1 degree tweaks, right? I mean
Yeah.
that I will tell you it's we do behavior change at Referco. That's really what we do. We take people from where they are to where they want to be. We don't do it with like this giant massive action. You know, for instance, we do a 30 mornings class which helps them build their ultimate morning ritual, right? What they do from wake up to, when
Yeah.
they do their first, got to drive the kids to school or whatever it may be. And it's first love yourself, like fly. If you truly want to fly, first love yourself, and then you'll be able to take care of the world after you first love yourself and take care of yourself. And they always come in and they want to wake up earlier, right? A little bit earlier. Well, we don't jump in and say, all right, get up an hour earlier. Instead, what we do is the first week, you get up 15 minutes earlier, right?
Yes.
So instead of 8, you're getting up at 7:45. The next week, you're getting up at 7:30. The next week, you're getting up at 7:15. And the final week, you're getting up an hour early. And then we have 2 extra days because they're always 30-day challenges. And those extra 2 days, we help you with getting up that 7. And then you're on your own, right? And hopefully you're ready for that. And most people are. But it's one of those where if we would have just said from the first day, you got to get up an hour earlier, they would have self-destructed in about 3 days,
Yeah.
So it's I'm such a believer in the micro acts of courage is such a great way to put it, and it's doable. It's we can all take that first step if it's small. If it requires a giant leap, then you know what? Maybe it's going to be harder to take.
Yeah.
So I love that. All right. So all right. How can readers best put the advice of begin boldly into practice and implement the strategies that you've outlined in the book? Like as almost like a final words of wisdom, final words of advice for our listeners and viewers.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to mention about the book is I say at the beginning, it's light on anecdotes and big on action. And that's because what I heard from working with people over the last, 15 plus years is that they get so much inspiration from hearing about other people's stories, but they want more than this is how I did it. They want, this is how you can do it too. And so the book is very prescriptive and actionable. It's actually written a bit like a curriculum or a career coach guide in a book. So I mentioned something earlier, Michael, where I said people aspire to take risks, but struggle to put that into action. And each chapter ends with an aspiration to action exercise. So you can close the gap. Ask yourself every single day, do my actions match my aspirations? And if not, let's close the gap. And that's really what that exercise is about. And then each chapter has the risk, reward, refine, repeat ritual to help. So really that's embedded in there. But other than that, my biggest bit of advice, beyond what we talked about, which is focusing on courage over confidence, which I think is really, really important every day, is asking yourself exactly what I just said. Do my actions match my aspirations? And if you're aspiring to be bolder and braver in your career and in your life, but your actions aren't matching that, find different avenues, whether it be a coach, a book, or other ways to build accountability and close that gap, but keep yourself honest by asking that question.
Wow. So for those of you listening and or watching, you've got to check her out at ChristieHunterArscott.com. Check out the book. It's right here. I'm telling you, you're going to be able to get your copy soon. Go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any of the other resources to get this book. You're going to want to read this. And the other thing that I love about your book, Christie, is that at the end of it, you have built this for book clubs. And you've got the discussion guide at the end. So for those of you listening and watching, don't just buy a book. Maybe you buy 10. Or you buy the book and have 10 other people buy it, and then you Zoom a book club or do a in-person book club in your local area. A lot of our listeners and viewers are parts of book clubs and have established book clubs. This would be a great next book club. This is fantastic. I know that Sherry has already suggested this book for their book club, and their book club's very heavy fiction, or has been. And but Sherry's become a leader in that group, and she's hoping that they'll go down the nonfiction path with her and learn something. instead of just drinking wine and reading fiction. But hey, it is what it is, right? So it's all good. But Christie, I just have to say, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to have you come on again after the book launches and you're super famous and, it's going to be hard, even harder. It was already hard to get you on the schedule, but even harder to get you on the schedule. And we'll just go into more depth on Begin Boldly and all the other, I just love the micro. I mean, I took 2 pages of notes, legit, right? So page, and then all over the back, and it's just, I just love it. So thank you for being our guest here today on Referrals Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you what Christie has inspired in my head is just this acronym that I've spoken about before, but she just absolutely crystallizes this for me and hopefully for you. I mean, how many of you guys and gals remember, like Charlie Sheen? Right? Or how many of you remember like Britney Spears and continue to see Britney Spears and Charlie Sheen? And if you'll remember, they both went on these very public downward spirals. And we got to see it. We got to watch it, unfortunately for them. And it was one of those where Charlie was on the #1 show. Britney had just launched the #1 album. And I think what happened is they're like, I have arrived. And they didn't know where to go from there. Where do they go from #1? They stopped learning and growing, and they started just feeling. And they felt maybe less than fulfillment, and they went on this downward spiral. And it's like, all right, if there's a downward spiral of life, there must be an upward spiral of life. And I want you to imagine like a spiral staircase to the heavens. Yes, I just said stairway to heaven, which instantly shares my age. But I want you to imagine this upward spiral of life and this staircase. The first step on the upward spiral of life, I believe, and this is entirely my opinion, has the letter L on it. Yes, we're going to spell life. It's an acronym. L is for learn. Learn. And that's where I think Charlie and Britney got off the path, was they just quit learning. They're just like, oh, I have nowhere to go from now. And the thing is hopefully, I know you learned from Christie in this podcast today, and you've learned from past episodes, but it can't stop there. The next step has to be the I, which is implement. The second step on the upward spiral of life is implement. And you got to do it. Learning without implementation is just entertainment, which is a lie. L-I-E. See how I put an acronym in the acronym? I'm not going to stop with that. The next letter, as you know in life, is F. The third step on the upward spiral of life is F, and it may surprise some of you. It is fail. You are going to fail when you implement. You're not going to do it perfectly. All the great stuff Christie led us with today is just like, you gotta fail. You gotta have these micro acts of courage. You're gonna fail. Embrace the failure. Failure's not fatal. Right? Failure is actually a step in the right direction of growth, but you got to fail. Fail is just first attempt in learning. Dropping an acronym in an acronym, right? Why not? Then the next letter is E on the upward spiral of life, and the E is for evaluate. Stop, reflect, look back at what you learned, implemented, and failed at, and does it feel good? Did it help you achieve your goals, help you move towards your dreams? Did it help your family? Did it help your kids? It's like evaluate. Does it align with your values? And if it does, you know what you're going to do? You're going to take the next step on the upward spiral of life. And the next step is L for learn. The next step is I for implement. The next step is F for fail. The next step is evaluate. But here's the difference with those upper steps. You're at a higher level of implementation. You have a higher level of failing. What successful people have really done is they just failed at a higher level. They're continuing to fail at a higher level. We're not like entertainers who get 100 takes to get the one shot right, but maybe we are. Maybe that's how life really is, you know what? We need to fail forward. I'm just hoping that everybody here gets on the upward spiral of life from what Christie shared here today and just implement. Begin boldly, damn it. Go get the dang book. Make it happen. And then the rest of you I'll see at rms22.com, right? So That's all I've got to say about that. Today's episode, I'm telling you, this is one that you need to share. You need to go get the book and do a book club. You need to just get off your duff and get into action, even if it's some small micro act of courage. I love all of you. I hope to see you in joingengen.com. Join the generosity generation. You're our kind of people because you're here today. And we'll see you on the next episode of Referrals Podcast.